While it may not be a formally recognized clinical condition, someone with high-functioning anxiety might come across as an exceptionally organized and high-achieving perfectionist. However, beneath the surface, they often experience intense levels of overthinking, self-doubt, and nervousness, which can adversely affect their physical well-being and self-care practices, including sleep habits, dietary habits, and exercise routines. Welcome to Normalize the Conversation. I'm your host, Francesca Reigeter, and today I'm joined by Nadia Fiorita, a therapist who specializes in working with adult and young adult women who struggle with high-functioning anxiety. In this episode, we discuss a topic that affects many people but often goes unnoticed: high-functioning anxiety. We'll explore what it is, how to recognize the signs and symptoms, and most importantly, discover the steps to healing and finding balance in the midst of it all.
Thank you so much for joining me today. I'm really excited for our conversation. But before we begin, I really just want to check in. How are you really?
I'm good. I'm a little tired, but I'm good. As you know, I think in our, recent interactions, my husband fell in Connecticut when we were at a family party, and he had to have surgery a couple weeks ago. So very, very unexpected. It's definitely been stressful. But this morning I'm feeling good. I'm excited about this podcast, and I have a full day of clients after this, so I'm excited.
Oh, I love that. And I'm glad your husband is doing better. That had to be so just completely overwhelming.
Very overwhelming. And we are actually getting ready to go to Italy in about 6 weeks or so. So when it happened, like my mind immediately went to like, oh my goodness. I mean, obviously I hope he's okay. And knew like it wasn't like a, life-threatening injury, that it was mostly just going to be very life-changing. But I was like, oh my goodness, this on top of planning for this trip, because we got legally married here in Florida, but we're doing a symbolic ceremony, like a micro wedding in Italy, where our families are both from, in late September, early October. The kids are going back to school, all of the things. So it was definitely right when it happened, like earlier on, it was like, oh my goodness, this is so stressful and overwhelming. And how am I going to do this, care for him, right? Help him do all of the things, with everything else going on.
Yeah, it's so hard when first of all, something unexpected happens and you're like, oh my goodness, how do I process all of these different thoughts?
Yeah.
And then how do I show up for them and show up for myself in the midst of all of that? I know that's something I really struggle with, is trying to like comprehend and process all the different things happening, and then make the first step on what do I do first? What do I do now?
Right. And I think you can relate to being a caregiver as well, right? And just understanding that role can really, if you don't prioritize yourself, if you don't make time for yourself, if you don't do the things that are really important and helpful for your own well-being, then you will be, less effective as a caregiver, right? Less nurturing, less patient, right? The things that we need to be able to properly care for someone and take care of ourselves, right? So one of the things that I've been doing is, first knowing that if I don't take care of myself, that the consequences of that will not be helpful or positive, right? And I've been able to just get up a little bit earlier than my husband and just spend some quiet time journaling, getting back into working out and exercise, which I shared a little bit about on my Instagram yesterday, because I know when I'm putting movement and exercise and my quiet time first, then it helps me feel so much better, more mental clarity, more calmness. You're a better problem solver. You can show up better for your clients, right? Because I'm a therapist. So those are just a couple things that I've been doing.
That's something I've been doing lately too. So I love that because I realized that I was starting my morning. I live with my grandmother who has Alzheimer's. I'm her main caretaker. And I would start my mornings with like straight to, oh my goodness, I need to have her breakfast on the table. I need to make sure she takes her medicine. I need to make sure she like showers and uses soap and like gets dressed and has like her life together and what
Right.
she needs to do. And I started in so much stress before I had coffee. And I was like, I had no patience, no ability to like just figure out what to do other than like do this, do this, do this. And I
Exactly.
realized that she was like, why are you so mean? And I was like, I'm not trying to be mean. I'm just so overwhelmed. So
Yeah.
taking that morning, waking up like an hour before she does, maybe an hour and a half, and having my coffee, then making her breakfast, getting it on the table, then going to tennis or going for a walk, just doing something for myself all before she wakes up. So that way it's not so overwhelming because in the midst of it, if you don't make time for yourself, something I've recently learned, it's it feels impossible, honestly, to show up in any way for anyone.
Yeah. And then the other person feels it, right? Like, that the irritability, the lack of patience, the frustration, the people around you can really feel that and pick up on that. And then they might take it personal when it's really just your level of stress and anxiety and overwhelm and how that is internally for you.
Absolutely. And then it turns into kind of just this idea that you don't like them or you don't love them or you don't want to be there for them or that they bother you. And I think for
Or
me,
that they're
it's,
a burden, right?
yeah,
And that, like taking care of them is too much. And in certain ways, it might be a lot, right?
yeah, absolutely. And then it's like hurting your relationship, but on the outside to other people who aren't there in the midst of it, they're like, oh, this person's just mean. I had a couple of my grandma's friends think for a while that I was like the meanest granddaughter. And I was like, because they hear the stories of how like I would be like, take your medicine now. Like, you're not doing anything until you swallow your pills. And then they would see me and they're like, well, it doesn't seem like you're struggling with it. It doesn't seem like you're overwhelmed. You're still doing your nonprofit. You're doing well in school. You're smiling with people all the time. You're doing all these things. So it's not that you're overwhelmed. It's that you're just mean. And I had to learn that I guess I was like, I don't know what the right word is, but I guess I was trying to so hard to be myself at some points. But then when I was alone, or it was just me and my grandmother, I was this full level of stress, all of it coming out, but people only saw like that external like piece of me. So it just didn't align.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think you're speaking to what we were, going to talk about today, right? In terms of high functioning anxiety. And I think you just kind of like, hit the nail on the head with regards to describing this this type of experience that's not necessarily a formal clinical diagnosis, but very common, very shared experience where on the outside, someone might appear to have it all together, to be really successful, to be outgoing, organized, proactive, all of the things. But inside, they have a very overactive mind. They're overthinking. They're worrying too much, over planning. They might struggle with perfectionism or people pleasing and overcommitting. So I think, that's really kind of one of the really important points that we talk about when it comes to high functioning anxiety is that someone, despite everything that they feel internally, functions really well and might be really successful in all these different areas of their lives. And people wouldn't necessarily pick up on or know that they have these internal struggles.
Yeah, no, that describes me to a T. And I didn't realize that that was something everybody, like, or not everybody, but a lot of people deal with. Because when we talk about anxiety, a lot of times it's like it impacts someone's life and ability to do anything. So because you're succeeding and it doesn't seem to be impacting your daily life in the sense of you're still able to do school or work, able to socialize with your friends, that it's not anxiety. So it's just something you're making up in your head. I think that's what I thought a lot. I was like,
Yeah.
I'm making all of this up. I'm stressing myself out for no reason instead of acknowledging what was happening to me and trying to figure out what to do next.
Right. Right. And it could feel, I think sometimes, you know, I think like the experience in and of itself and what you just kind of talked about, we tend to like mask it in ourselves and try to minimize, you know, what we experience, whether it's, oh, I'm just like worrying a little bit about this, or maybe I'm just being too dramatic about that, or, you know, we kind of like make up these rationalizations, or, you know, really just minimize our internal experience. And the reality is, even if we're still able to function and be successful in our lives, we still might really struggle with, you know, intense worry and, you know, all of these other things that really kind of take away from our ability to feel joy and fulfillment and peace and relaxation, and like that's where we all really want to be. Right. That's what we want to feel. And that's one of the things that I think stands out the most when I'm working with women, is that there's such like restlessness internally, that they lack this ability to just feel, you know, this calmness and this peace, and really just enjoy themselves, and be present and engaged in their lives.
Yeah, and I think that there's this idea that that's how women should feel. Like we should feel overwhelmed and stressed and try to do everything for everyone else. It's been so normalized in society that we forget that we can take care of ourselves, or not even forget, just don't know that we can take care of ourselves, that we can feel calm, that we can feel joy, that we don't have to put everyone and everything in the world on our shoulders and do everything for everyone first, but we can actually like coexist in the world and feel happy instead of feel like we are, again, in charge of everything and everyone else first.
Yeah. Yeah. And really just this idea, I think, of prioritizing ourselves. And um, on another podcast, we talked about something that I'm finding really like women struggle with. And it's this idea of, how do you define your own success in your life, right? And what are what are your values and your priorities? Because I think we tend to take on, just so much expectation, so much pressure, you know, what's acceptable in our society and our culture, and what do we think we should be doing for other people, or should be taking on, or should be saying yes to. And it's really like, well, what's your compass in terms of what do you value in your life, and what do you prioritize in your life, and what does success look like for you, whether it's in your career or your family or your relationships. And a lot of the times it comes back to being present, being engaged, doing, you know, things that are passionate, um, things that you find, ignite passion and joy. And, you know, there's more to it than that. But I think that really kind of helps women determine what's important to them. And then that acts as um, you know, helps them give direction in terms of like what choices to make, and what's important to them in whatever season you're in, right? Like for you, you're in a very particular season. You're in school, you're a caregiver. So how do you manage all of that? And for someone that's maybe balancing a career and family, it'll look different for them, right? So I think really kind of being in tune with that is so, so important. And I know one of the things we were going to talk about was, you know, what are 3 things that women with high functioning anxiety can do? And I think that's one of them, is really kind of being clear and identifying what are your values and priorities in this season of your life, because things will change, right?
Things will change. And it's so important to identify your own values outside of what kind of the world is telling you, because it's, first of all, the world is so confusing to begin with, because what's like acceptable today may not be tomorrow. When it comes to, I mean, I was talking to my younger cousin the other day, and she was like, you know, all my doctors are older males. And I was like, because if you look at older generations, it was more acceptable for the men to go and have a career in this field and women to stay home, which is fine. But that was just what was acceptable. And now in today's world, it's more acceptable for men and women to be working toward these career goals and to even stay home. Men can stay home now too. So whatever it looks like for you or what you want is okay. But to realize that society is not always the same in the sense that it can be confusing when you allow your whole life or values to be determined by what society thinks is okay, because 10 years from now, the roles of the typical gender stereotype roles of what you should look like, how you should feel may not be the same. And then it's confusing. I know I was talking to one of my aunts the other day, and she's like, growing up, you're taught that you were just sensitive. If you cried, you were just sensitive. And now if you're crying too much, maybe you should see therapy. She's like, but I grew up in a world where therapy was like for crazy people. And I'm using the finger quotes for anyone who's listening and not watching. But so she's like, it's so overwhelming because now I don't know what to do. Am I sensitive or am I struggling? It's like as society changes, what is acceptable then may not be acceptable now. I don't know if I know I'm going in a circle right now, but do you get what I'm saying?
No, I totally get what you're saying. And I think you're talking about, just the expectations that are put on us and what we're taught by society and what the norms are and how that kind of shapes how we show up and the choices that we make, and I think it's so interesting because I think when other people might, if you're going to cry, right, or you're going to show emotion, like I think that's really a healthy thing. And what we know about crying in particular is that it's like it allows your body to like detoxify, right? And it allows your body to release these toxins and stressors and emotions, and it's very cathartic and therapeutic. And I think someone else seeing someone show vulnerability and expressing emotions might make them uncomfortable. So what people tend to say is, "Oh, you're being too sensitive. You're so emotional." But it's really the other person's, I think, discomfort with someone showing emotion. Does that make sense?
No, it does. And I think also this idea of not knowing what to say. So it's like this fear of, I don't want them to crying and being upset. So it's like, it's fine. It's okay. You're going to be fine. Mm-hmm. And like you said, like, it's okay to cry. I personally love when I have those, I will like schedule in like a time to just sit and feel, because I'm very one of those people who's very nonstop all the time. And then eventually I get to a point where I'm so overwhelmed and exhausted. And it's either going to be like me screaming or me crying. It's great to schedule that time to just cry and let it out however I need to, so that it doesn't turn into like this built up anger. But for so long, I thought I had to like suppress it all, because that's what people would say, like, it's not that big of a deal. Like, you're going to be okay. But sometimes like it may not be a big deal to someone else. And like in the grand scheme of things, it really may not be. I get that. However, right now it's a big deal to me and I need to feel, and that's okay.
Yeah. And I think you are spot on when you say that other people might not know how to respond or help you, or react in that moment. And that's part of, I think, what feels uncomfortable. And if we care about the other person that's showing emotion or crying, we also don't want to see them in pain. And we tend to kind of go to this place of like, well, okay, what do you need? Like, I can help fix this, or like, I don't want you to, feel upset. And it actually just might be in the person's best interest to just like, feel and express what they're going through. And I think a lot of the times people just really want someone else that's going to be there with them, not necessarily respond or react in any type of way, but just kind of allow them to feel, seen and heard. And I think that's really, really powerful.
Yeah, it is. That's one thing that I'm really loving. My younger cousin, she's one of my like best friends' favorite person. Love you, Bella, if you're listening. For so long, when I'd cry, everyone would kind of be like, oh, she's just so dramatic and sensitive. And I did cry a lot as a kid. Like, I will totally own up to it. I was also struggling with anxiety, but, and was untreated.
Right.
But now she's learned that, like, if I'm crying, if I'm overwhelmed, if I'm just like going through it, she'll just sit down next to me and we'll just sit in silence. But it's like, I'm not alone. I'm not being forced to talk about it if I don't want to talk about it. But if I
Exactly.
do, she's right there.
Right.
And she's not like minimizing it or invalidating it or trying to fix it. It's just that, like, you're not alone in this. And that's, I think, sometimes all I need.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I think you said it beautifully. Um, sometimes someone just being there is really powerful. And if you want to talk about it, then they're there and they can listen and support you. And if not, that's okay too. You can choose not to talk about it, but really just kind of be in that moment and go through or feel through whatever you need to.
Yeah, I think there's a misconception too that, like, you have to talk about it all the time. And
Mhm.
when you're ready to, absolutely. And you find someone that you trust in the space that you trust, absolutely. Like, talk about it. But you don't have to be ready to talk about it right away. You don't have to talk about it with the first person who shows up and who's there. You can talk about it when you're ready to with who you feel comfortable. And I think for me, that was something I struggled with, was feeling like I had to talk about something right away. It's like,
Yeah.
sometimes I don't even know what I'm feeling first. I need to, like, figure it out.
I was just going to say that. I was just going to say sometimes what happens is we don't even really know why we're emotional or feeling anxious. We just know that we are. And so we need time to kind of really figure that out and sit with it and think about it and process it and maybe write about it, and so and that takes time. That's a journey, I think, and a process in and of itself.
Absolutely. Recently, not too recently, maybe like 2 or 3 semesters ago, I had taken an exam and I don't know what happened, like, as soon as I hit submit, but I just started crying and I just called someone and I was like hyperventilating and they're like, what's wrong? And I was like, I just took this exam. I don't know. I feel like I'm failing, like, this whole big response. And she was like, okay, calm down. Like, it's going to be okay no matter what. And if I had, like, processed what I was feeling in that moment, I would tell you that I was feeling worried about, like, the next steps in life. And if I'm going to take this type of class again, is that the path I want to go into? Do I want to go into a doctorate? Do I want to continue on with this master's? Like, what do I want to go into? And I think that class was just something that I found so fascinating and it changed kind of the idea I had for me.
Mhm.
So what she received was the perfectionist, I need to have straight A's, like, phone call, freaking out that I wouldn't have. But, like, deep down, it was something completely different. And if I
Right.
processed first, it was such a different conversation and one that probably would have been more beneficial in the long run,
Mhm.
because that's what I needed to talk about, not this. I mean, I definitely don't do well if I don't get A's. It's a big thing for me, and that's something I should work on. However, that was not, like, the overarching fear of it. That was just, like, what was presenting on the top.
Yeah, absolutely. That makes sense. And as you know, continue to reflect and think about it and give yourself the ability and space to do that, then it became much more clear what you were actually worrying about or thinking about.
Yeah, exactly. Sometimes we just need time and we don't need to, I guess, solve it right away. I think that's something that I also struggled with, is feeling like I need to solve any issue and any, like, thought that comes into my head. And I need to work through it. I need to process what it means first and figure out why that thought exists. A lot of times, I think for me and for my friends, our thoughts always like, oh no, what if I fail? Like, what if I fail? What if I don't make it? But when we think about it more, it's like we're worried about what to do next. We're worried about those next steps. It's not necessarily if you're going to, like, succeed or fail. I mean, those are, like, the two, like, opposite sides of the spectrum. But it's, how do I take the next step toward what I want instead of feeling like I'm stuck in this I'm not moving forward space.
Yeah.
Because if we don't take time to process, we do get stuck in that kind of, oh my goodness, what if I fail? I don't even want to try because I don't want to see what happens.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think when you're progressing in anything, right, whether it's a career or, something new that you're trying or whatever, thinking about, well, how does it feel to go to the next step? And how does it feel to go to the next level? Right. And that can feel scary. And it can also feel exciting too, because there's all these positive opportunities that come from it, and growth and evolution. And so I think our mind, because our brain tends to help us keep us safe and in the familiar and in the comfortable, that when we're progressing like you are in school, right, and like leveling up, right, and all of that, it's like, oh, well, I can't do that, it's too scary. But in reality, it's like, well, is there any evidence that I've failed before, or where has there been a setback, but what have I learned from that? And how can, really reflecting on that help me move forward? But I think it could feel scary to take the next steps. And I think that plays into just like the uncertainty of life. And that's very much where the worry and anxiety can come into, because we want to know. We want to know. We want to be certain of what's going to happen. And, because then that helps us plan and prepare and, all of the things. Right. And that's a big part of the anxiety piece too.
I want to know before I write this tuition check, is it going to work out? But when
Exactly.
all of this like worry exists inside us, and it's all internally in our heads, and to the outside world, we're doing fine. Like I said, I can have straight A's, yet I'm freaking out about what that next step is. And what happens if I make the wrong step? I go in the wrong direction. Or what does that look like? What if I take a step outside of the path that I've been going on? Is that the wrong direction, or am I forging a new path? It's like all this fear can exist inside. And a lot of times we just don't see it. And we again assume that someone who's doing so well must be fine.
Yeah. And I think the other thing too that I'm thinking about is, women that live with or struggle with high functioning anxiety are always doing. We tend to like really kind of like to stay very busy and productive and overload our, schedules with work and commitments and all of these things. And we don't usually give ourselves the space to even kind of like reflect on what it is that we're thinking and feeling and what our internal experience is. It feels so uncomfortable to us that we can't even really sit with it. Right. And that's something that you've been able to do in your own life. It sounds like from what you're sharing, you're really kind of cultivating this space and time for yourself to, whether it's on your own or in conversation with somebody else, this ability to reflect and process. And we all need that. We all need that. Like that's so, so important, especially if you want to live a more, peaceful, calm, content, meaningful life. So,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Absolutely. And I know the first time I tried to like not do so much and sit with my thoughts, I just like tears streaming down my face, could not stop. It was so overwhelming because for the first time, it was like pushing it all to the side. It was like, let me actually figure
Yeah.
out what it is. And the thoughts can be very overwhelming and scary. And just not knowing what to do with those thoughts, because what if they're true, right? That's the first thing that always would come to my mind is, what if it's true? What if I'm not going to succeed? What if I'm going to fail? What if? It's all those what ifs. And it's like, what if it's true? And it's really hard to get to a place where you are willing to sit with those thoughts and allow them to exist, because it's really hard. The first few times, the first like couple months maybe of doing it, it was just me crying the whole time until I got to a place where I was like, okay, like the thoughts exist, this fear exists, but like you said, what's the evidence? What is the evidence for me failing? And if I did fail something, what happened after? Maybe I did fail a test one time, but I did better the next time. I studied, I changed my studying habits. Maybe I changed and made sure I got more sleep. What did I do differently? How did I
Right.
keep going instead of being like, oh no, I'm going to fail and the world's going to end? Apparently the world doesn't end when you fail.
Right.
Apparently.
Yes. Yes. And it could provide us with really good information, right, about what might be going on in ourselves or in our lives that is important to acknowledge and understand.
Absolutely. So going into this high functioning anxiety, what are some of the warning signs? I think a lot of times people are like, does that apply to me? Or I don't know. So what are some of those like key warning signs that people may be able to identify within themselves?
Yeah, I think so it's going to look different for everybody, right? Because we're, all unique and it's going to be, really dependent on the person. But I think a major one is really kind of letting um your self-care go. Like if you are really kind of not sleeping well or not taking care of yourself, not eating well, not, moving your body, I think one of those life areas really tends to, slip. And that could really be a warning sign for us. Another one is if you notice, really intense irritability or anger and frustration towards yourself or someone else. I think that can, are you lashing out? Are you snapping? Do you have a lot less patience with other people or with yourself? I think that can be a warning sign. Are you avoiding, social situations? Are you kind of withdrawing and retreating? I think that tends to be a big one. And I think part of that is because living with high functioning anxiety can just be so draining and exhausting. And I think we know that in social situations, whether it's professional or personal, we need a level of energy and effort to show up, right? And it could feel really exhausting. And we also might worry about, how other people might be judging us or what other people will think of me. So those are some of the types of, thoughts and worries I think that could come up. The other thing too, just really quickly, I'll say one more is a lot of the times, women that live with high functioning anxiety or struggle with it also have some symptoms of depression. And I think you probably understand this, that anxiety and depression often go hand in hand. But I think, sometimes feelings of worthlessness and just like hopelessness and that can show up, whether it's, losing interest in the things that we typically find, that we love to do. Are we not doing those things anymore? Are we just like, is there a loss of interest in the things that we, typically used to enjoy, and maybe we're not doing those things anymore. So I think if you're noticing some of that depression, that could also be a warning sign as well.
Those are literally all warning signs that I dealt with. And going back to that very first one, like, yeah, that lack of self care, that not sleeping, changing your eating habits, not taking care of yourself. I know for me, I thought that was something that was so normal that people just didn't sleep, that you don't need to get a lot of sleep, that, the early bird catches the worm, right? Like if you're crying, if you're sleeping and other people are working, you're missing out, right? So you got to keep working and don't put too much time into sleep because sleep is considered like lazy or whatever. So I thought like that was so normal to not sleep and to over caffeinate to make up for that. And I thought that like just not having enough time to eat and sit down, like that's totally fine. That's totally normal. Not having time for yourself. No one has time for themselves. No one really takes care of themselves. That's all like a myth. Like those were the thoughts that I had in my head. So I didn't even realize that these are warning signs. But those are such like key warning signs for so many different things. If you're
Right.
not taking care of yourself, like you deserve to take care of yourself. You deserve to feel good. You deserve to feel happy and calm and at peace. You don't deserve to feel like you can't catch your breath ever or that you're not important or that
Right.
you can't rest. Like you deserve to rest. You deserve to feel important to yourself and to others. Like you deserve better than not just existing for the world and not for yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think if you are, if your sleep is really disruptive, are you skipping meals? Are you not moving your body at all? Are you, the other thing is too, like, are you using substances to really kind of cope with some of these, feelings of anxiety or other, um, I don't like to use the word negative emotions, but just like other, just, painful emotions, whether it's frustration or anger or sadness or whatever, the way that we cope, can also be a warning sign as well.
That is so true. And then looking at it from the other side, like what if there's someone in our lives that we think may be struggling with high functioning anxiety? What are some warning signs that we may notice from like an external point of view? Because I know a lot of what we've been talking about is like internal.
Yeah, I mean, I think it could kind of just be if you're observing these things in other people, right? Are you noticing, irritability or anger or frustration in someone else? Do they, are they taking care of themselves? Are they getting enough sleep? Are they, engaging in some type of movement? Are they withdrawing socially? Have you noticed a change, in their social life, that they're not really, showing up as much? Are they canceling plans? Are they not doing as much? Um, and I think you can just kind of pick up on, right? Like if someone is exhibiting a high level of stress and overwhelm, you're going to see that in somebody else, right? You're going to see that in their face. You're going to see that in their body language. You're going to see that in their behavior. You're going to see that in their emotions. If you're in tune with that, then, and it's someone that you're close to, you're likely going to notice that, right? And so, yeah, I think it's kind of the same thing, whether we're looking at it for ourselves or in someone else. Is someone drinking more, right? Is someone sleeping more? Like you want to notice any type of change that's not typical or normal for them.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I know for me, one of the biggest things was like my friends asking me like straight up, like, are you sleeping enough? How many hours are you sleeping? Like, you don't seem to be eating the way you were before. What's changed? And kind of pointing it out to me and giving me a chance to see, is this something I'm intentionally doing? Am I intentionally setting my alarm like an hour and a half earlier because I need that? Or am I just trying so hard to get so many things done that I'm not making time for myself? Am I actively choosing to not make time to like move my body because I've been so busy and I haven't made space on my calendar? Or am I just not interested in doing it anymore? Do I not care? What
Right.
are the actual causes behind it? But when they pointed out in questions that kind of forced me to answer those questions for myself instead of that kind of like, you're not sleeping anymore. You need to sleep. And I know that when we're noticing in other people, it's so important that you can totally talk about it and bring it to their attention and show support, but always making sure it's not in a accusatory way. Like you're not accusing, because then they go into the defense. Like if
Yep.
someone came up to me where like, you're not sleeping enough, you're not taking care of yourself, you're not doing this, I'm going to fight back. They could totally be right. They could be 100% right. I'm so going to fight back. Don't mean to. It's just like that natural kind of response that I want to defend myself. But when you're coming at it in a chance of, do you feel like you have? Giving me a chance to reflect on, have I? And if I haven't, why?
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think you're exactly right. And I think you can bring it to someone's attention. It's all about how you're bringing it to someone's attention, checking in on them, asking them questions, asking them how they're doing, maybe making an observation or something that you're noticing without being blaming or judgmental or attacking, because that will, I think create some defensiveness or make it more likely that someone's going to shut down in that conversation and not really want to open up and talk about it.
Exactly. And when someone shuts down, it's a lot harder to get them to want to reach out for support.
Mm-hmm.
But like they deserve support. But what are some resources or treatment options or support that's really available for someone who is living with high functioning anxiety?
So I love this question. And I think, one of the maybe misconceptions is that if you're functioning really well or you're doing really well or you're successful in certain areas of your life, then maybe you don't need therapy. But therapy and counseling is a great option for someone that's experiencing high functioning anxiety. And there's a lot of treatment options, cognitive behavioral therapy, dialectical behavioral therapy. There's, mindfulness can be really, really transformative and beneficial. And now I think just with the, with this larger conversation that we're having on social media, online with regards to mental health, there's so many podcasts, there's books, there's, phone applications that you can use to help track your mood and, practice mindfulness and really kind of learn strategies and skills. And so an app is not a replacement for therapy. It could really be used in conjunction with it. But those are some of the things that, are out there. You can also look for, if a support group sounds like something that you want to get involved with, you can look locally in your area. I love right now that therapists are showing up on social media and putting themselves out there, because I think it makes it easier for people that are looking to work with someone to find someone that they, might really click with, or that specializes in what they're looking for. And again, Instagram or TikTok or whatever is not a replacement for therapy, but it can allow you to see, all of the different resources that are out there for you. Yeah. And, I love reading. So, there's so many amazing books out there that, for me, like, I'm more holistic minded. So you can absolutely, seek medication if you feel like that might be helpful to you. For me, I'm more of a, let's try some lifestyle changes and skills and strategies before we go to a medication. There's so many holistic wellness practices that you can try, light therapy. There's so many things now holistically that I think we have access to that can help us feel better too.
Absolutely. There are so many different avenues and things we can try and do, and finding what works for you, what makes you feel comfortable. I
Yep.
know for me in the beginning, I was so anti-medication. And I was like, okay, well, if people are saying medication's the option and I don't want to take medication, there's nothing for me. And learning that there are other avenues to try as well. And then I got to a point where I realized, yes, I needed medication, but I also needed all these other skills and tools, and I needed therapy. So I
Yep.
needed so much. And I didn't realize that that was like an option, that you could pick different things. And it's
Mm-hmm.
not like, oh, this or that. I think it's so important. Again, find what works for you and try different things that make you feel comfortable, and finding the right person to support you through it, because you might not click with every therapist. And that's okay. I had one therapist who tried to point out to me that I had high functioning anxiety. And I mean, she's 120% right. However, she approached it with, it was like I had an exam and I was freaking out the whole like 2 weeks leading up to it. And just every single thought in my head, like I was going through it with her. And then she's like, okay, we're going to come back after the exam. We're going to talk about it. So I took the exam, got my grade back. And she was like, okay, so now were all those thoughts worth the end result? And will those thoughts didn't exist? Could you still get that grade? How can we work through making those thoughts not what you associate with getting a good grade? I was like, well, I don't know. It works. I was like, it works. So why would I change it? I was like, if I freak out, I get an A. Why would I change that? I don't know what it's like to not freak out. And so I don't know if I'm still going to get an A. And
Right.
I was not ready to accept that that's not like, it doesn't have to be that way. It doesn't have to be, I have a full breakdown, can't function, don't sleep, don't eat for 2 weeks leading up to an exam. It could totally be, I just make a study plan that works for me and I cope with those feelings and still do well. And I remember the first time she tried to bring that up to me, I was so mad. I was like, no, it's not going to work. It does work. It works.
Yeah.
So finding the right people who can support you and who bring it to your attention in a way that makes you feel good. If she went straight to like, get over those thoughts, let it go, you don't need to act like this, there was no way I would have dealt with it. But I have friends who are like, no, I need to be called out like harshly. We're like, you have to prove it to me. Like, I need to see like proof that it doesn't have to happen this way. So finding someone that works for you and the way that you need. And lastly, I know that you have some resources, if you wouldn't mind sharing those with us.
Yeah. So I have a free guide that I put together So you can find me on Instagram at Holistic Anxiety Therapist. And I have a free guide where I share my, top anxiety strategies for high functioning anxiety. So you can get that guide. It's easy. You just put your name and your email in. And at the moment right now, I'm actually working on an online course that I plan to launch in the fall that is going to be self-paced. I'm working on it right now with my virtual assistant, and I'm really excited to launch that. I have another mini course that I did last year that's around $37. So it's really about helping to tame some of those anxious thoughts and worries. But this course that I'm launching in the fall is going to be much more comprehensive. So if you want to try the mini course, the lower ticket, offer is there. And then if you want to grab the guide, you can get on my email list, and through email, I'll be sharing and on social media, my new course when that comes out, which I'm really, really excited about.
Thank you so much for listening to Normalize the Conversation. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review. This podcast is an initiative of Inspiring My Generation, focusing on normalizing the conversation, bringing education and awareness to the forefront, and amplifying global voices to spark change and hope. Inspiring My Generation is a 501c3 nonprofit organization on a mission towards suicide prevention through awareness, conversation, education, and support. Connect with us on Instagram at Inspiring My Generation and visit our website inspiringmygeneration.org to learn more about our work and how you can make a difference.